Hi, everybody. This is Stefani Rupert. Thank you for tuning into the Meaning of Everything podcast, where we're revolutionizing the way that we think about what it means to be human. Today is episode number 19, and I'm bringing on James Hill Jr., a scholar of religion and holographic images in Black performing artists at Northwestern University. So I actually just finished talking with James. I decided to record this introduction after he and I had spoken, and I'm so glad that I did, and I'm so excited about the conversation that we had. I first encountered James when he was giving a talk on Colin Kaepernick and the NFL protests and how religious themes were laced throughout the dialogue and what we could learn about us as a species and American culture and all that stuff. And he was a brilliant speaker. And today we talk a little bit about that, but we also spend a lot of time talking about his work on what he calls the resurrection, or the parousia of Black performing artists by holographic images, which is apparently something that happens. I didn't even know that we could make holographic images of performing artists. That's how little I pay attention to performing artists. But there you have it. That is a thing that happens. I want to kick today off by simply saying, I'm just so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be here. I recently upgraded a number of things. I had to purchase a new computer to fix the sound issues. And so now hopefully I sound a little bit more comfortable for people who listen on podcasts. And I'm very, very happy that I was able to do that. It was not necessarily easy. And I have new lights and stuff for people who watch at home. So all great things, upgrading. And hopefully then I have production. I have production that even more matches the quality of the guests that I have on. In the coming months, I'm really excited. I have a lineup of some really, really brilliant speakers, people who have really interesting ideas and who talk about them beautifully. So do stay tuned. I want to stop talking now because my conversation with James is so excellent. And thank you. That's all. We're going to jump right over. As ever, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, at Stefani Rupert. You can email me at tmoeverything@gmail.com. If you want to drop a review for the podcast, I'd be super grateful. If you can't, I will absolutely understand. That's all for me. And here we are jumping in with James. Hi, James.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm
welcome.
doing well. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I hear it's a little chilly on your side of the...
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Yeah. What's the negative 25 or negative 50 degrees,
That's crazy. Although by the time this comes out, it'll be a little bit later. So
hopefully, yeah. So hopefully the polar vortex would have done its service to us.
Yes, a mere memory.
Yeah. Yeah. Cold memory, but a memory nonetheless, right?
Yeah. Cool. And you're in Chicago, right? You're at Northwestern?
Yes. Evanston, right outside Chicago, but yeah, at Northwestern for sure.
Cool. And you are you a postdoc? I actually don't know.
No. I'm a third year doctoral student in the religious studies department at Northwestern.
How's that going?
Yeah, it's going great. So I'm in comp season, so doing comprehensive exams, gearing up towards the good old prospectus. So I have no original complaints. We'll say that. no complaints that we can't hear from a litany of other grad students. But no, I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah, we don't have that here in England.
Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah, it's the sweet life. It's the sweet,
sweet,
easy life.
Yeah, we can talk about how easy it is. I'm interested in how easy. Yeah, I know you have some things you could share about that.
Yeah, well, generally speaking,
Yeah.
Here you have to be a little bit more self-directed, I think,
Mm-hmm.
which for some people can be stressful, but also there's just less that you have. So I definitely have appreciated my experience here. I'll just
Yeah. I dig that.
Yeah, very cool. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing and why? Why is it, what is it, why do you love it?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. What am I doing? That's the question you ask. Depending on what day you ask the grad student, you get a very special and distinct and interesting answer. So for me, let's see, what's today? Today's Tuesday. So what am I just here right now? It's Tuesday. What am I doing today? No, the work that I'm doing, I'm looking particularly at the relationship between the holographic, the way I coined it, the digital parousias, the holographic resurrections of dead Black entertainers. I'm looking at that through particular case studies. I'm looking at the holographic recreation of Michael Jackson at the Billboard 2014 Music Awards. I'm looking at the holographic resurrection of Tupac Shakur at the 2012 Coachella Music and Arts Festival in California. I'm looking at the controversy surrounding the alleged and purported Prince hologram at last year's Super Bowl here in the U.S. and Minnesota. I'm also looking at the holographic performance of Billie Holiday and the attempted holographic performance of Whitney Houston. So broadly, I'm interested in how there's a conversation going on. There's been a conversation happening about like what's really happening when corporate companies and through technology are claiming sole rights and going to court, arguing over who has the rights in a very literal sense to bring back dead entertainers to perform anew for audiences. And so there's lots of questions about what's going on with that. Questions about, first of all, how are these companies articulating that? Some are just saying that, it's not real, but we're going to market it as real. We're going to market it as live, never before seen performances. We're going to, place these presences on stage, have them do what they're doing. And, we're thinking about putting them on tour, is the talk. And there's rumors about a purported Amy Winehouse tour with a live band, right? And so I'm interested broadly on several things, why these recreations are not called presences, why they're not called apparitions, why we don't use the language of haunting, the language of magic or enchantment, right? And how is that connected to broader conversations about a disenchanted modernity, right? But I'm also thinking more acutely on what does it mean for Black entertainers to be resurrected, right, from the dead, right? Particularly if we're talking about Jackson or Tupac or Billie Holiday or Prince. These are artists who were controversial while they inhabited the flesh. We're talking about artists who were censored, artists who we're definitely talking about later in the 20th century, taken off of the airwaves. We have whole congressional, meetings in the U.S. about, should these people be allowed to perform and should our children have to hear them? Let's listen to them, particularly if we're talking about Prince, right? We're talking about Michael Jackson. We're talking about videos that were banned and taken off of television. Tupac Shakur. You have, presidential campaigns addressing, the thuggerism of Tupac Shakur. So what does it mean that now, when they're dead, you can bring these artists back and now you have them performing in manners and ways that are amenable to, broad white audiences. So, there's a conversation I want to have about surveillance, about confinement, and about really what is it about these, digital parousias that, can be talked about and circulated internationally, but, oftentimes it's not seen as a real conversation of and for religious thought. So I'm interested in talking about those things.
I have rarely taken so many notes while somebody was speaking before. There was so much interesting stuff in there. First, I had no idea that these holographic images were even being used for performances. I didn't know that was a thing. And
it was a thing for sure. For sure.
That's amazing. That's fascinating. And I think you're right. There are so many questions in there wrapped up in terms of capitalism and religion and ownership of bodies. And the perhaps we can start with your language of resurrection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do you choose the word resurrection, right? Why the religious lens here?
Yeah, because that's the word that the companies and news media outlets are not using, right? So the word even more than resurrection, the language I deploy in my research is parousia, right? Coming from the Greek term that has a heavy utilization in Christian theology. Parousia literally means arrival. It means presence. It means visitation, but it takes a particular texture in Christian theology to mean the ultimate return of Jesus Christ, the glorious return of Jesus Christ in history, right? And so I begin to think about broadly, parousia, because these Black entertainers are, marketed as returning. Tupac returned back to us on Coachella. Michael Jackson returned back, at the Billboard Awards. Prince was making a return back to us at the Super Bowl. So there's this language of visitation. There's this language of appearance, right? But I think that as you pointed out, the resurrection language is that it's seen as a feat. Right. I mean, if it's just this is CGI, technology, we have a piece of paper, in front of a lens, and it's not, it's fake, it's 2D, 3D, whatever. No one's really given dollars to go see something that is just, a piece of paper in front of a screen, right? No one's paying, or rearranging bills to see essentially what's, the actual technique is not a hologram, it's called Pepper's Ghost. So no one's, rearranging bills to see, a Pepper's Ghost, an illusionary technique that looks kind of like Michael Jackson, but we all know it's not. Like, they're not marketing as that. They're marketing it as Michael Jackson. They're marketing it as, Whitney Houston. And so it's the language of resurrection adds a particular texture because as I want to argue, what's being said is we're bringing them back, right? They want these who were thought to be dead, right? And we mourned their passing, right? We have now brought them back, and it's a glorious, blessed reappearance, right? And so it's a blessing to see Tupac, who was, killed in a very violent manner, to see him saying, quote, "What the fuck's up, Coachella?" Right? That's a feat of not just, technological significance, but I would argue of religious and theological significance. But we're not having that religious and theological conversation. I'm curious as to why.
And do you look at how these images are received by the people who buy tickets, right?
For sure.
Do you see religious themes not just in the promotion, but also in the reception of how people relate to them?
No, for sure. No. I think that's a great question. As of right now, and I think this is, depending on when, the dissertation is written, when it's released, I'm interested to see where this conversation will be in 3 years. Because as of right now, because a lot of it is at this stage legal battles, right, over the sole rights. I think that's an interesting double term, sole rights, right? Who has the sole rights to these presences? So we don't have concerts, and we don't have world tours or nationwide tours. You have residencies. There's a residency of Billie Holiday, but we don't really have in mass these massive tours. And so first, what we have are these, that's why the language of parousia is so important for me, because you have these visitations, right? Tupac comes at Coachella. We weren't expecting Pac, but Pac is here. Oh, glory, hallelujah, Pac is here. Michael Jackson's at the Billboard Awards. He was dead 5 years ago. Now he's here. Then he's gone. There's an arrival and an ascension. They're here, then they're not here. But to your question about, the reception, I think that's a great question, because when you see them, particularly if you look at the Michael Jackson, quote unquote, performance at the Billboard Awards, you have, tears. These people are, folks are, caught up, to use the and the theological tenor of the term. They're caught up. There's tears. They're just in awe, right? So it's not just like, oh yeah, we're watching an illusion here. No, they are. The affect of the space, the affect of the audience would give one the idea that they're seeing their loved one once again, right? And so there's a whole lot happening here. And meanwhile, these companies are seeing the cash benefit of creating these spectral, moments for popular culture.
Of course they are. So is there like what is different about seeing these holographic images as opposed to watching a video? And as a follow-up question, is this a technology that is going to become a part of our daily lives where we have holographs of people who we have personally lost?
No, great question. So I'm gonna answer the first one first. I think the distinction is that in watching the videos, then we're watching the artist as they would have us see them, right? And so if you think about the artists I'm using, like Tupac, right? He was the videos of Pac are not, Pac being controlled by, the corporation or the record company. I mean, that's why I'm interested specifically in Black entertainers who instantiated a rupture in culture, right? Blackness as, that which is excess, that which cannot be contained, that which cannot be, even though surveillance tactics are deployed, the surveillance tactics are never totally successful, right? You can take Michael Jackson's videos off the airwaves because he's grabbing his crotch too long and he's dancing through burning crosses, he's breaking through windows, and so we're gonna censor that video. But then he gets on tour and he's grabbing his crotch even more, right? But yet that video still exists. So insofar as you watch that video, you're watching Michael Jackson as Michael Jackson. And you're watching these performances that aren't just rupturing particular logics of respectability, but you would argue that these artists intentionally are seeking to unsettle, the normativity, whiteness as nomads. They know that they are in the gaze, right? And yet they're doing something performatively while in the gaze on their own terms, right? The hologram is not on their own terms. The hologram is the fact that, if we're going to bring Michael Jackson back, we're going to bring him back on our terms. And so is Michael Jackson grabbing his crotch on the stage? If he is, how long is that hand staying on his genitals, right? Is when Pac is in California at Coachella, is he bringing that audience, right? That nice audience that paid all that money to be entertained? Is he reminding them of the murder of Oscar Grant in Oakland? And Pac is from the Bay Area. There's no mention of Oscar Grant on that stage. There's no mention, of the murder of unarmed Black people in 2012 on that stage, right? So there's something about the management of the Black haunting, right? If you go with the work of Avery Gordon, hauntings are meant to unsettle. Hauntings happen on their own terms. You can't control the haunting. You can't subdue the haunting so that it's an order. An orderly haunting is an oxymoron like jumbo shrimp, right? And so, what does it mean to say that you can bring back these Black entertainers, but there's no need to worry about censorship because now we can bring back Michael Jackson or Prince or Tupac or Billie Holiday, and white folks can pay their money, and wealthy folks can pay their money, and patrons general can pay their money and not have to worry about if it's not compatible with our Christian logics or our cultural sensibilities. There's a lot going on there.
So they really do have the freedom to make these holographic images do what they want.
Right. Tupac said, "What's the fuck up?" What's the fuck? Wait, what the? What the fuck is up? Yeah. What? Right. Yes, it was something about fucking Coachella. Like that's like so. The CGI is able to do something, right? And so if CGI technology can have Tupac saying "What the fuck's up, Coachella," they could have had him say, "What happened to Oscar Grant?"
Exactly.
But they didn't have him say what happened to Oscar Grant. They had Tupac say "What the fuck's up, Coachella," and that was a decision that they put in the mouth of Tupac.
Right. So in the legal debates, is this question of how they're censoring these artists factoring into the ownership to the soul rights?
From the cases I've read, not so much. I mean, when we're talking about these entertainers, they're industries, and so much of the legal argument is about the monetization of their image and likeness, right? And so that's one of the questions I want to raise. It's not just about who's going to make the dollar and who has the right to make money off these images. What I'm saying is that there's another component about many of these artists fought viscerally so for their music not to be at the tail end of a McDonald's commercial, right? But what does it mean that now is like, you own the rights to all your masters, but like you didn't put a provision in your will or your contract that like a company can, raise you from the dead and have you perform at festivals in the summer, to their pleasure. Like that's not, people aren't writing that into contracts in 92 or 03 or whatever. So that's the legal question that, we still have to explore. It's not just, who has the right to bring them back, but under what conditions are they brought back? Are they brought back, and what are they bringing back to do? Because if they're just being brought back to make audiences feel good about themselves, then the question has to be like, was that the primary, focus and means and goal of their art, which is to make particularly mainstream US audiences feel good about themselves.
Right.
That's what the holograms do.
Right. So is this question of censorship at the center of what might be said to be a difference between holographic images of Black and white performing artists, right? It's sort of like a censorship of discussions about race or anything, right? Being disruptive to society.
Yeah, no. Great question. I think that the question is we find it in different spaces, right? Because I think each artist will have their own set of questions. So there will be a set of questions, if and when the Amy Winehouse, tour, rolls around. There's people who study Amy and know of her art to say that like, this, what we're seeing is this what Amy would have, is this compatible to the cultural production that we have from Amy, right? So that's a particular question, but there's something about Blackness, right? That when you get into what political theorist Richard Iden referred to as the informal politics of Black popular culture. Popular culture is a space where Black politics in a very particular way is meted out, right? Before we have, according to, Iden's argument, before you get to the civil rights movement, and a particular iteration of the civil rights movement, right, in the 60s, Iden argues that Black popular culture was a site where Black activity, political activity happened. Black voice was given in the realm of popular culture. Resistance, took place and was codified through music, through art, right? And so something happens when, the civil rights movement and legislative measures are taken such that there's now a proper way to engage politically, right? Now, we don't need the artists to, politics doesn't happen at, in the town hall or, Carnegie Hall or Madison Square Garden or, on these vinyls or whatever. No, you must, vote Super Tuesday, contact your local representative. And you've heard these arguments now, like, okay, that's nice. That music is nice, but, we need to vote. We need to do this. We need to do that. Like, there's a strict bifurcation now that there's a real side of politics where real change happened. And there's this singing shit over here, right? But yet the beauty and the power of Black artists is that Black artists have always presented, like I said, Richard Iden's book In Search of the Black, fantastic, lays this out wonderfully, that you don't see this strict bifurcation in Black popular culture. That's there. There's still, where there's still an underrepresentation of of the multiplicity of Black voices in the spaces of the so-called electoral politics, informal politics, whether it's rap, or whether it's rappers, whether it's singers, whether it's screenwriters, whether it's novelists, whether it's poets. You have a multiplicity of Black expression that gives voice to the various concerns of Black communities, of Black social life writ large. And so when I'm speaking about the Black artists, when I'm speaking about Black entertainers, when you choose to resurrect or bring back these Black artists, but it's on the conditions of the engineer. And now the engineer decides what the artist says. Then that engineer is also making a claim on Black culture, because the engineer is saying that this is an authentic Michael Jackson performance. The engineer is saying this is a real Tupac performance. And so now we're talking about cultural memory. And now we're talking about revising cultural memory, because now if Tupac's performance and authentic Pac performances have nothing to do with indictments of the state, then now we're going back, and these new holograms can then speak back
to what they did in the flesh. So now we can read Pac through the hologram. So now you can read his own political activity. It's a way to rewrite history of sorts. So now Michael Jackson isn't dancing through burning crosses. He's not turning into Black Panthers. He's not talking about white hoods and devils and sheets. No, he's just pleasing people. So these forms of technology, right, are also ways to make a claim on cultural memory, also making a claim on what constitutes Black popular culture, what constitutes Black popular music, what constitutes Black popular performance that elides, right, the political foundations that really were the source and spirit of the artist's cultural productions itself, right, that we don't get much of the explanations we have right now.
Yeah, so these artists are made palatable because that's the best way to make money, right? Because you get the highest number of people to consume things, right? And is it also in part because we so much want to avoid looking at, especially I think predominant white culture, so much want to avoid looking at ugliness in our systems, right? And so we do tend to bifurcate our entertainment from our politics, that's a privilege to be able to bifurcate your entertainment from your politics.
Right. You want an Ali that doesn't talk about Vietnam. You want a Kaepernick that doesn't kneel. You want a Michael Jackson that doesn't dance through burning crosses. You want a Tupac Shakur that doesn't flip the bird to the nation state, right? At first this was just, the way that, mainstream white American audiences prefer their Black entertainers. Now it's not a matter of preference. Now there's a way to make that happen. Now you can conceivably bring back Ali, and Ali will give a speech that talks about how great it is to be an American. Now, if you can have Tupac say, "What the fuck's up, Coachella?" You can have Ali supporting the troops. You can have Tupac Shakur, you can have a hologram of Tupac Shakur, stomping for your Democratic or even conceptually, even your Republican nominee, depending on who has the legal rights to Tupac Shakur's image and likeness. Now you can have, you have a man who stood in visceral opposition to the formally political. Now who's to say now Pac won't be at a governor's ball near you, right? Rapping, two of America's Most Wanted or California Love, while, politicians are serving, $10,000 plates to, support their political campaigns. All that's possible, right? That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's incredibly fascinating. So then can we just return a little bit to summarize for people who aren't familiar with the ideas that you were mentioning about Black culture being one of excess or being able to be outside or uncontrollable by the dominant discourse?
Yeah, no, for sure. No, great point. I think that it's important when you're looking at Blackness, right? As all these terms are just, assumed like, Black is African American. It's, it's a distinction. It's a racial marker. But, when you look at, the various ways that Blackness has been theorized, the various ways throughout the history of colonial modernity, within the various histories, particularly of the U.S. nation state, Blackness has been, not just a source of, derision and the signification of abjection, but through the FBI, something that had to be constrained, something that had to be confined, something that had to be surveilled, right? I mean, if you check up through the Freedom of Information Act, look at how many Black poets were under constant surveillance. Like, we're not talking about, guerrillas. We're not talking about, militaristic revolutionaries in the traditional sense. We're talking about, Paul Robeson, right? Singers and, poets and, athletes, right? Actors and actresses who were surveilled for what, right? And you think about what is Blackness such that, it's the source of so much needed surveillance. I'm thinking of Simone Brown's book, Dark Matters, right? Surveilling Blackness, why Blackness needs to constantly be confinable, right? It needs to be constrained. It needs to be sequestered. It needs to be managed, right? And so the only legible blackness, the only permissible blackness, arguably, is the blackness that is compatible, right? And the blackness that is willing to assimilate into the broader logics, right? You're American, right? You're a U.S. citizen before you're black. You're Christian before you're black, right? There's something about, if blackness was not a problem of and forethought, why does everybody need you to be something else before you're black, right? But even with all that being said and done, the surveillance is never totally successful. The confinement is never totally successful, as much and insofar as you can censor Michael Jackson or, James Brown or Nina Simone. There's always something that exceeds that. There's always something left on the stage. There's always, as much as you want to say, we're going to squelch this, we're going to abolish this, we are going to exterminate everything. We're going to censor it. We're going to, scrub them from our labels. We're going to censor their movies from our theaters. There's always something that, like, goddamn, it got into my daughter's house. It got into my my bedrooms, going back to the 50s, right? You can't listen to Chuck Berry. What's underneath, those mattresses? Right. So there's always something underneath. There's always something that exceeds that which seeks to contain and constrain it, right? And so that's, for me, is the issue that's not being discussed, right? Or not being discussed as much when we're talking about the legalities and the oughtness, right, of these spectral presences, of these hauntings, of these holograms, is that, what do we do with excess? Is there a place of access? And if you have Black culture production and Black culture recreations that has no place for excess, where is the Black in that? Or the question is, are these holograms even thought to be Black? Is that even a desire? Because they could very well be like, well, Tupac isn't Black. Tupac isn't Black. Tupac is American. Right. And so what does it mean for now these holograms not even be promoted as Black artists, right? Because that's not profitable.
It's just so funny to think about Tupac as a nationalist, American. It's such an odd thought. Yeah, it's very fascinating to try to rewrite history like that. So I first encountered your work when you were giving a talk about Kaepernick and kneeling, and you used the phrase re-signification of the Black body. And there's definitely, you mentioned athletes a couple minutes ago, right? So there's definitely a parallel here where in entertainment roles, in athletic roles, right, there is like a proper place that, to which Blackness has been allocated in our broader culture. But as soon as you step outside of that, right, as soon as you try to assert some kind of power or state an opinion that is relevant to our political discourse, Kaepernick has done, right, then immediately you're censored, right? Your attempt to be censored. And you also mentioned that this was, Kaepernick was seen as like anti-religion. And can you sort of discuss how, or tell me a little bit more about how religion plays into this sort of allocation of the proper places of Blackness in society?
Yeah, no, great question. Well, in that particular talk, what I brought up, or I think how I started out the presentation, was mentioning how outside of in front of his locker after one game, he had to hold really a mock press conference and attend to the question of his purported Muslimness, right? He had to stand in front of reporters and answer to their question of, are you a Muslim? And he had to sit up there after I can't recall right now if it was after a game or after a practice, and he had to explain that, no, I'm not a Muslim. I respect Muslims. He had to give the whole, I love Muslims, got a lot of Muslim friends. If I was a Muslim, there wouldn't be a problem with that. But no, I'm not a Muslim. And the question is, why does that become a question? Not just why did it become a question, why did it become a question that he had to refute publicly, right? That what's connected to, Muslimness and him taking a knee, that people saw a performative gesture taking place prior to, him actually doing his job, and people saw that and said, oh, he's a Muslim, right? Like that
That whole, he's a Muslim, right? Barack Obama, he's a Muslim, right? There's something about, particularly the way it's attached onto blackness, right? That for anything that's not compatible with the particular, ideation of Americanness, right? It's so often, attached to the person that, ask them if they're a Muslim. Think he's a Muslim, right? And so when talking about religion and Kaepernick, some folks want to talk about kneeling. I mean, in ways where there's obvious resonances. Kneeling is a pious gesture. We see kneeling and, Christian, demonstrations, king, kneel, right? But I think that's a very clean connection, right? I'm more personally fascinated and compelled by the messier connections, right? Like, what if it's not even about just like, linear, or like easily mappable theism, right? What if it's the actual resignification, right, of his own person? The fact that at that football site, right, is a place where he, as a black person, right, who possesses a signified black body, is surveilled, is confined on that line, right? Literally, there's a line that his cleats, are on, and he must stand a certain way. His owners, literally, the language of ownership. His owners literally demand that he stands a certain way, and he chose to take ownership of his own body and kneel before he started work, and he's unemployed because he took a knee before a song, and hopefully things will turn, but as it looks, he very well may never throw a football, right, on a Sunday, under the employment of the National Football League, again, because of what he chose to do with his own body in front of 70,000 people on television, right? Like, on one register, when you name it like that, that's insane. He chose to take ownership over his own body for 20 seconds or for a minute, and he's unemployed. He has to find a new mode, right, of engagement, right. I mean, he's been doing the same things he's been doing the whole time, but like, if his way of earning a living was throwing a football as an NFL quarterback, the sheer fact of him taking control of his own body means that he has to find a new mode of earning income, right? And so for me, I'm interested in that. And where's the religion in that? It's not just like, well, where's the Christianity? The kneeling, like, no. Like the very fact that there was a demand made on his body. There was the surveillance of his body, and not only he took ownership over his own black person, right, but he inspired other black athletes to do the same. He inspired cheerleaders to do the same. He inspired Pee-wee football players to do the same. He inspired white women's soccer players to do the same. Oh, he can never work again. And that decision-making, I want to say, has deep resonances within religious thought, because there's something that he obstructed. There's something that he did that was deemed heretical, that now he must be anathematized. The space must be cleansed from the sheer mention of his name, right. The space must be cleansed from all traces of Colin Kaepernick. What's going on there? It's not just a business decision. It's far deeper than that, right? And I think we have, as scholars of religion, we have an analytic to answer things that, sports analysts kind of fumble and stutter over.
I know that this is a loaded question, but talk briefly about the idea of this kind of protest being un-American.
Yeah. I like that. Because what happens oftentimes is like, no, let's prove how American it really is, right? It is American, because that's what the Constitution supports, and that's why the troops go out there, and the troops fought for Colin Kaepernick to do that. So let's subsume this under American logic. It's like, no, like, what if it is un-American? Like, what if it is like, Colin Kaepernick wasn't, protesting the troops. He was protesting, anti-black violence of police, the anti-black order of policing. But what if, the detractors of Kaepernick are onto something? What if they see
the fact that to, protest the anti-Black order of policing in the United States is also to see how the anti-Black order of policing is connected to the broader project of empire, the broader project of militarism in the world. And so what if their critiques of Kaepernick is true? To take a knee during the anthem is not to just point a light on policing, which some of Kaepernick's supporters want to say, no, he's only taking a knee to point a light on this one thing. No. He's taking a knee during the national anthem, which means that he's rupturing and unsettling the mythos of the nation state. Right, and causing the nation state to not account for its violence against Black communities via, excessive policing, right? It could be a redundant concept, right? It's not just that. If he's bringing into question the utilization of violence against persons of color, right, and the unatoned blood of persons of color that are shed, right, by state-sanctioned agents, right, then, in a very real way, what if the un-Americanness of his protests are the conditions of possibility for anything happening, right, that can, bring justice to these communities? And so in a very real way, the need for his protest to be deemed American, right, could be antithetical to the whole gesture itself.
That's
Possibly.
It's very deep. Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. So we talked a little bit, can we, about the idea of the white gaze?
Yeah.
Yeah, like what is this and how does it sort of factor into what's going on here with Kaepernick and also with the holographic images, right?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, we find this throughout, Black thought, right? You find this in the work of Du Bois. We find this in, visuality studies, right? So in many ways, in the term we have, the answer, right? It's, it's not just, white folk looking, but, there is a demanded comportment, right, and response to the fact that you are always under surveillance, right? You can look at the examples we've given, but I think that the examples we've given of Kaepernick and the holograms are connected to the quotidian, everyday terror of being under the white gaze. My father tells a story of his going out one day with his grandfather, my great grandfather, when my father was a boy. They're walking on a street in downtown Temple, Texas, where my family is from, and a white boy comes up, is meeting them head on, and the white boy tells my great grandfather, "Boy, what are you looking at? Get the fuck off the side of the street. I mean, get the fuck off the sidewalk." And my father, he only knows his great grandfather to be a man, to be the man. Like my great grandfather built their home with his hands. Like he was a, whatever your construction of Black manhood is, like to my father, like his pawpaw was the manliest of men. And he watched his pawpaw say, "Yes, sir," and get off the sidewalk. And my father, recalls looking up at his, his grandfather, and asking, like, Paul, like, why did you let that white boy talk to you that way? And there wasn't a response verbally. There was a look like, don't you dare question what just happened, right? That's the white gaze, right? It's the fact that whether it's a 70-year-old white boy or a 70-year-old white man, when you see whiteness, when you see white folks, you already know how to respond, whether it's on the sidewalk, whether it's in a lecture hall, right. When there's white bodies assembled in a space, nothing has to be said. When white folks are in a space, in a subcutaneous way, in your bones what's demanded of you when you're around, those who claim possession of the earth, right? And so we see this articulated and, resisted, or, we see accommodations all throughout Black history. And Black traditions, I'm more inclined to say in the US. And what I'm interested in Black popular culture, the ways in which particular Black artists refuse to, wear the mask that Paul Lawrence Dunbar wrote about, the mask that grins and bears,
right? That's why I study Nina Simone. That's why I study, Billie Holiday, when she got up there and sang Strange Fruit, right? And the way she didn't write the song, but the way she sung that song, right? The way Nina Simone said Mississippi Goddamn, right? And at the end saying that's it, right? And she was singing to white folks in the audience, right? What does it mean not just to know that there is a gaze, but I'm interested in those particular artists who, through their production and through the sheer fact of their emanation on the earth said, fuck the gaze, and we'll see what happens after that. Right? Oftentimes it's not good. Nina Simone lost her career and, was dancing, was performing, singing in, seedy, clubs, in Europe, we see what happened to Tupac Shakur, before, we can say personal things in his life, but, we see the fact that, did he have peace from the nation state, right? You can see, Prince and Prince desire to name himself for himself. Marvin, like any black artist any black athlete, any black artist who said that the myth of this country and the stories this country tells of itself, is not true. And what this country demands of me when this country looks at me, I'm not willing to give. What happens to their career? If they're lying and they're just, just exaggerating, what happens anytime, a black person tells the country, what this country demands, lets this country know what this country demands of it and said, I'm not willing to give that on your terms? What happens to their career? What happens to their radio spins? What happens to their movie opportunities? What happens to their, Pro Bowl aspirations? Where are they at on Sunday mornings? Not playing football.
No, they're not. Right. So this is making me think again about the religious significance of the holographic images, because you mentioned that sometimes people will like cry, right? There is a resurrection. This figure has returned to them. But I'm wondering if a part of what is so powerful about these images to people is often precisely what's being stripped of the images, right? Like if what is so powerful is that they were standing outside of what was demanded of them, right? And they were choosing to disrupt whatever, they were choosing to be disruptive. And I think this has the power to be deeply emotionally significant. But then this religious quality of being deeply emotionally significant is actually what's being stripped of them when we put them, in the popular game.
There's a lot. No, you're spot on. There's a lot that's happening in that moment. So the question, right? This is, the question, of philosophy and other areas is that like, what is conjuring the emotion in that moment, right? What's inciting the emotion? Is it the actual performance, or is it the memory that the performance is, like you said, is obstructing, right? Because if you just see it on its face, you're like, oh, they're crying because their performance is so awesome. Or are they crying because of what that performance is insufficiently seeking to signify? Or is there a way that the performance itself even isn't seeking to signify that, but the moment you bring Tupac on stage, Tupac is going, the memory of Tupac takes over the space. So now, like I said, so what happens when the hologram is seeking to participate in this revive, not even participate, but is desiring to, be the architect of cultural revision, the revision of cultural memory. But because of this thing of excess, right? And because folks remember Pac and folks can hear Pac and folks remember what Michael Jackson, meant to them performatively. And people remember how Prince made, them feel when Prince played that guitar on his own terms, that when they see these images, really the CGI is doing what the CGI is doing, but they're recalling the performance on its own. Because it's also important that these people were alive to see the actual performances in the flesh, right? Which is interesting when we look at what happens in the future as generations, transition on, when all you may have are the holograms and then, the actual cultural productions, but who will be here to actually, articulate the dialectical tension between, culture production and these corporations, resurrecting them for their own means and ends.
Right. Although, as you said, people like these these figures and these aspects of the culture are uncontainable, right? And they do find their way, you know, they do find their way into our homes. And so, I hope that the machine, right, the placating Brave New World machine doesn't manage to, I don't think it will.
Yeah, well, I love your optimism. They've done a great work. They've done a great work with Martin King. Martin King has sold Ford commercial. He's sold Ford pickup trucks. He's helped Florida State recruit. Yeah, like look up Martin King. All the ways Martin King is used. Like how many people are quoting Martin King and Martin King about housing and Martin King in Chicago, or Martin King talk about militarism or critiques of capitalism and why someone decided to shoot him on a balcony, right? It's because he loved white folks, right? Like that's why they shot him on the balcony. And so you see that without even needing CGI, without CGI. They've been pretty successful in recreating and, reconceptualizing, what cultural figures mean and what was the meaning of their message. And so now without even needing to, reinterpret the text of King and trying to obscure certain text, now, forget, resituating the text and obscuring the text. Now we just bring back Martin and have him say whatever we want him to say. Right. And so that's where, the reservation, comes in, is the fact that what we're seeing the first fruits of, I'm arguing the first fruits of over here regarding these holograms, we've seen and not only have we seen in other iterations, but to now there is such a cultural claim, a white cultural claim, a white liberal claim on Martin King to actually talk about King's, King's not just critiques of Vietnam, because everybody, King critiqued Vietnam. No, King critiqued the project of empire and the moral claims, right, that empire made. Like he did not think empire as a concept was efficacious on the world stage. That's foundational to Martin King. That is nowhere, even in the radical King discourses, the way he foregrounded empire in Vietnam is not just this, appendage of King or, this kind of, outlier to King, but Vietnam, his critique of Vietnam was constitutive to what he was increasingly becoming, becoming more known for, which was his critique of the U.S. as an empire and the unrighteousness of its constitution as an empire, that the only way the U.S. can be deemed righteous is to relinquish its power on the world stage.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about King while you were talking about the remaking of images, because Martin Luther King Day was just, last week, and you see all of the posting of the memes on the Facebook. And I think my hope comes from the recreation, the constant drawing of attention of new figures and Kaepernick and the leaders of, all the various movements that are going on today. Yeah. So as heartbreaking and I think politically regressive, the whitewashing of King is, we will hopefully continue to come out of people will continue to come out of the cracks.
Yeah, WEB.
Scholars like you will continue to remind us that we're.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that one of my favorite quotes comes from Du Bois. I have a hope that while not hopeful is not hopeful. It's not hopeless. I have a hope that while not hopeless, right? I have a hope that while not hopeful will not allow itself to be found hopeless.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Also one of my favorites. Okay, so we're on time. If there's anything that you would like to share before we go, any last words, I would be more than happy to hear them.
No, I'm not really much of a last words guy. I'm excited for the next word. So yeah, until the next word.
It's been an honor.
It's been an honor. It's been a privilege. I appreciate the time. Been a great conversation. I have a lot of conversations, not too many great ones. And so, well, not professionally. I say that because then I got a lot of friends and family who may take issue with that. So I mean, it's refreshing to have great questions asked and meaningful questions asked. You get the what are you doing? That's fascinating. It kind of stops after that. But I appreciate the ground we were able to cover. So yeah, looking forward to the next word.
Yeah, there is always more ground. So
for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very, very much. I will provide links to the kinds of artists that you mentioned and scholars that you mentioned. If you're interested in reading more. Thank you. Thank you so much. For everybody else, I will, of course, just be back in a few more days, and we'll go over some related concepts. So thank you, James.
Yeah.
This has been fantastic.
Thank you.